but realize that tonight's meeting is completely remote due to the snowstorm. Pursuant to Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and virtual. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. However, the meeting may be accessed remotely through Zoom and or Facebook. Agenda items are listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, and not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Those items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and will be broadcast. Meeting is also being recorded by the committee recorder, other members of the committee, and members of the audience. Minutes will be transcribed and made public and posted to our website once approved. I will take a roll call to see who is here. Ann Hutchinson.
Aye.
Jason St. Peter.
Here.
John Stephen.
I am here.
Welcome back.
Thank you for going to bat for me.
Yeah. Of course. Why wouldn't we? Bonnie Bond Buffoni.
Here.
Molly Thomas. Bill Fields.
Here.
Diane Singer.
Here.
Corey Sprague.
Corey.
Here. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Here.
Okay, thank you. Rich Tahoney.
Here, and I see that Molly just jumped on as well.
Okay, so it looks like we have a complete roster here tonight. And we'll start. I believe we have two student members tonight, Zoe Holmes and Julian Bedell. Welcome to them. It's been a while since we've had student members. I'm glad you're here. And just a reminder, if anyone wants to speak, use the raise your hand feature on the Zoom and we will recognize you. Peter, do you want to start off with superintendent's report?
I do. I did get a message from somebody asking about a phone number, so I'm just going to read that out quickly. It's 646-558-8656, and the meeting ID is 862-7341-6900, and the password is 771818. Okay. So the superintendent's report. Good news. Our custodians and maintenance staff did a wonderful job today cleaning up the campus. We got a ton of snow. I can't remember the last time we got as much snow as we got today. The good news is it's pretty light and fluffy, so it's not terrible to move around. So I'd really like to thank them for doing that. And staff and students have been working really hard, mostly remotely now, with the exception of two groups in cohort A, and we'll see where we land going into the new year. But people are working really hard. I got to drop in on some virtual meetings, and it's exciting. So I'm happy about that. The next thing I want to do is really a formality, and we've done this in the past for independent schools that are within our catchment area. The Berkshire Waldorf School, which is in Stockbridge, would like to participate in athletics through the MIAA. And while at some point we must have recognized them, we can't find records of that recognition. So I'd like to read something from them and have the school committee take a vote on it. And here's what the vote would be. To verify that the school has been approved of meeting the requirements as specified in Chapter 76, Section 1 of the general laws. If you vote to do that, then they can take a copy of that vote and submit it to the MIAA as part of their application to participate in athletics. They exist. I see them. I have been over there a few times. And it's probably good to have other schools participating in our athletic conference. So if somebody would so move that, I think that would be great, and it could be.
Peter, I should say one thing just for the record. Berkshire Waldorf High School is separate from the school now named Berkshire Waldorf School, formerly Great Barrington Rural Steiner School. So just in the record, it should say Berkshire Waldorf High School.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah's here from the Berkshire Waldorf High School.
Thank you.
Previously, Peter, and I have no problem with this, just for the record, previously, and maybe we did this with this school and we just don't have the records, we used to send a team of people in there for a week to make sure their curriculum and everything was met the law, even though there's no reason that we have to do that and we get no remuneration from the state. But you're comfortable with us doing this?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I have been over there. I know a lot of the people there. They're doing high quality work. They're a comparable institution. Yeah. So the whole state law around this, and we've had this discussion before. It's some like old fashioned thing that they're under our umbrella, but we're not compensated or supported in any way to formally do any of this. So there are very few new schools. They were doing this when they were in Great Barrington and they were still under our jurisdiction. So now they've moved to Stockbridge a few years ago and they remain so. But I'm perfectly comfortable. If I didn't have an existing relationship and I didn't know a lot of people there, then I might make a formal arrangement to do a visit. But they're known to me and I think to the community.
Terrific. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Aye.
So I have a motion by Bill Fields, a second by Ann Hutchinson. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, all votes at virtual meetings are roll call. Ann Hutchinson,
Aye.
Jason St. Peter,
Aye.
John Stephen,
Yes.
Bonnie Bon Buffoni,
Yes.
thank you. Molly Thomas,
Aye.
Bill Fields,
Yes.
Diane Singer,
Yes.
Corey Sprague,
Yes.
Rich Mahoney,
Yes.
and I vote yes. It's a unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you for doing that, and Sarah, we'll get you a letter or the part of the minutes reflecting this.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you for adding us, and many thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next thing on my agenda is the COVID-19 and sort of where we are, and that's an overarching thing. Just a couple quick updates. We're watching the numbers very carefully. The trend is in sort of all the different categories is coming down a little bit. I hope people continue to be really mindful. Hand washing, social distancing, masks, limiting unnecessary travel, and particularly limiting gatherings, right? Even relatively small family gatherings, which may be the nexus of spread of this thing. So that's going on. We got our thing from the state, like our waiver to be a lab, which lets us do the rapid testing. And we expect to have those tests shipped to us and maybe arrive. I don't know, because of the storm might have delayed it, but either tomorrow or perhaps Monday. So then we'll be in a position to start doing the rapid testing in our three schools and in Richmond. So that's good. I have this joint health and safety committee. We typically meet once a week. Steve and Ann are on it, and a number of teachers from each of the buildings. And we'll just check in and continue to see where the numbers are. I think since our last meeting, I shared that we're remote for a while, with a hope that if the numbers stay where they are, we might come back on Tuesday the 19th, which is the day after Martin Luther King Day. And that's an important number or date potentially, because that'll come up in our next discussion on athletics. I think that's it really on COVID-19. I'm happy to respond to any questions if people have questions about it.
Anyone have any questions?
Okay. Well, and something may come up at the end in public comment, and that's okay too. The next thing on the agenda are athletics, and both Christy and Carl are on the phone or on the line. What is going on, and I think we've talked about this, the two things really in play are skiing and basketball. Skiing, we feel comfortable starting. We solved all the issues that Sean and a few other people brought up at the last meeting. They're in a position to practice. They can do that outside, and I think we're really in good shape there. So skiing has the green light. The next one is basketball, and with our remote posture, we're delayed a bit in when we can start. It doesn't seem to be common sense to not feel that we can't have kids in school, but we would be practicing. So Carl shared a memo that was in the packet that I think all of you saw. And I think the implication of that would be that if we return in some sort of hybrid model, potentially on the 19th of January, then that's when we would be able to start practice. Christy or Carl, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just add that we started skiing this week, and we've got about 30 students on the team, and it's going well, and there's no issues at the moment. So that one's off to a good start.
Okay, good.
I have a question. So what are we at? Where is the county at with scheduling for basketball games?
So we met with as ADs in Berkshire County on Wednesday, and they're going to get started a little bit earlier with some games. As soon as there's actually Mount Greylock, Wacona, and Hoosick Valley that have started practices, and they hope to start some games in late January. We can't join them until we get our 10 practices in if we go hybrid on the 19th of January, then we probably would start playing games the 1st of February or right around there. And then we're hoping to have 10 games running through March 5th. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Any other question?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'll put my video back on. So for skiing, how many schools are participating?
So at the moment, it's us and Wacona, and Pittsfield is in a similar boat. They're not going to start skiing until they go hybrid on the 19th of January. So they're going to be added to the schedule later. And then Lennox has reported back that although they're not going to go forward with basketball, they're going to try Alpine as well. They hope to be added later in the schedule as well. So that's pretty much the 4 schools that typically do Alpine skiing.
And then how many schools are like signed up and ready to go with basketball?
As I said, there's those 3, Greylock, Hoosick, and Wacona. Mount Everett's been approved to start early January, so there'd be a 4th that would be playing basketball late January, having games. With our January 19th hopeful start, we wouldn't be able to play games until early February. So there's 4 starting in January, and we hope to join them along with Pittsfield schools, maybe Drury in February.
Okay, I'm just curious of how many have signed on.
Signed on to play games.
Yes.
There's some that have signed on to play games starting in January, and then there's some that are hoping to play in February. There's two different start dates. Some have started now, and some are waiting to start. That's why there's two different start dates for the games.
Thanks.
Jason?
Carl,
Jason?
go ahead, Jason.
No, go ahead, Corey.
I guess I was just hoping, Carl, I'm sure it was not an easy decision. It's not an easy decision to arrive at. And can you go into and let us in a little bit on your thought process and kind of why you're coming out on the side that basketball, which is fairly high contact and indoors, you're feeling is safe and should proceed?
Well, we've talked to, we've done some research. Peter and Christy have done some research as well. And, the physicians that I've talked to some physicians, and they've said, that it's okay to start with basketball, even though it's an indoor sport. Others have said it's not the best thing to do. I know Peter has talked to people as well. So honestly, personally, I would start right now based on what I've seen. I know there's a lot of schools that have started out in the eastern part of the state. There's lots of schools that are playing basketball, and they've been practicing for a while. But I don't know, Peter, you want to touch on that? Why, what your thought process was? Why on the 19th was a go?
Yeah, I have real mixed feelings about it, right? And what I want to be clear about is, in my mind, the soonest time to start would be on the 19th. I don't think it makes sense. Skiing, I see, is entirely different, right? It's outside, and I'm completely comfortable with it. Basketball is inside, and I don't think it makes sense to start while we're remote, right? On the other hand, I totally see the value of athletics and the opportunity for kids to participate and engage in it. So I think we're in this sort of wait and see thing, which I know is really hard on coaches and athletes and families. The soonest time I could see us starting is the 19th, and depending on what's happening with the virus, we may say things are good and we're comfortable starting, or if we get to the 19th and we stay remote, then the decision's probably just made for itself, right? And if we start and we see greater community spread, or really hopefully not, but spread within a particular activity or cohort of kids, then we would make a dramatic shift. Christy,
The only thing I would add, Corey, is we're also going to have the opportunity to watch Wacona and Greylock and see how things go. They're following all the modifications and to the rules and whatnot, and we're going to have a good almost a month where we can watch and see how they do.
Christy, do you have anything to add on this?
Not a lot. I mean, both of you touched on much of what I was thinking. Certainly, the modifications are something Carl and I talked quite substantially about. I know when I met with the Berkshire County principals, we were all in agreement that even though the MIAA guidelines were suggesting that we would have, we discussed not having any fans, and at the same time, I was pretty clear in my discussions with Carl that the priority for me is having students in school. So if we get to a point where we get kids back in school, but it seems as though basketball would increase the risk of having to go back into remote school, I think the top priority has to be having kids in school. So that's, the start date of the 19th, I think, gives us more time to see what happens in the other schools and where we're at with in terms of the virus and the spread in the community after the holidays. So.
And in my mind, it's not a given that we're starting on the 19th. That's my hope, but that's really contingent upon where we are with numbers in the county, right? So this is sort of nuanced. So all that I've said is that through the 15th or whatever day that Friday is going into the 19th, we're largely going to be in a remote approach. So the 19th is the earliest possible day.
Jason, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I had two questions. So one, the skiing is that a fully school sponsored, like the varsity, like it was last year, the year before? Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Okay. So as far as transportation, is the school providing any transportation to and from practices, or is that all incumbent on the families to do that?
It's Jason, it's on the families. It's always been that way because of the times of getting to the mountains, right? And I think maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, we ran buses and regularly nobody would take the bus, or they lived closer to the mountain than to school. So historically, it's been dependent upon families, or I guess when kids are older, they can drive themselves.
So there won't be any buses for races. That's what's traditionally happened in the past. When the kids went for races, they rode on the bus.
Carl, can you speak to that?
In my, this is my third year here, and we've never provided buses, even if it was to a race. The other thing that's coming up this year is that there's additional races that I think a fair amount of our skiers are going to take part in. So we're going to have different, there's club races. So we're going to have different times where people are going to be leaving as well. So a bus would be kind of inconvenient.
I would just like to add that, so if it's incumbent upon the families to bring them, then obviously there might be a case of carpooling where a certain family can't go. And I would just, appreciate it, Carl, if you could reach out to the ski coaches to make sure that if there are cases where it's not just the family in the car, but other people, that obviously they wear masks and try to keep their windows open, because obviously it's going to be less than 6 feet. But if you could stress that, obviously during these COVID times, I think I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Coach, sure.
So the second thing was, I watched the Pittsfield School Committee's meeting regarding their athletics. And what they voted on was the earliest they're going to go back. Once they go back, they're going to have a 5-day period where they're not going to play sports, just to make sure everything is going okay regarding their, I guess it was their swimming team. I misinterpreted. I assumed it was their skiing team. I'm not sure if that's going to be as well, but I'm not sure if that's how that's going to affect the schedule at all. Just a point of interest. But the other thing was, their gyms are being used for academic purposes to try to maximize their spaces. And it's my understanding that they're going to be playing in the boys club, practicing and playing. And I just want to make sure that our gym is going to be free. Christy, you could probably answer that. I'm assuming it is, Carl and Christy, but I just want to make sure that if it isn't, that we, obviously make the space for the teams and have that space available.
Yeah, the space right now, a chunk of the gymnasium is being used for storage. Some of that could potentially stay against the wall where it is, because if we're not going to have fans, we're not going to be pulling the bleachers out on that side. And if there's too much, that can be moved to the north end of the cafeteria. We are using the cafeteria now with desks for lunch with our cohort A group. So there is a space there, and we have one classroom that's not being used where we could store some more items if we need to. So yes, we'll be using the gym for basketball.
Great. And my last question was, so we're not having fans, is that correct, at our games?
That's correct.
That's right. So how about the other schools? Have they voted not to have fans as well? Or if this does go forward and we start playing away games, are our students going to be in a place where they're going to possibly have, 40, 50%, whatever the law is, of fans? I was wondering if there has been a vote taken as far as that particular subject.
There's not been a league-wide vote to agree on that, but I know just about every school has said that they're not going to have fans.
And I would just echo that at our county principals meeting, the principals were all in agreement that we were not going to have fans. Again, it wasn't a formal vote, but we all met, and that was the agreement. So,
Does that include family?
That's right.
yes.
Okay.
Just
Right,
to
but-
make it, just to formalize this, I really think that we should be very clear that if we're not having fans, that we won't go to any away games that do have fans, because if having fans there causes, added danger, then we shouldn't be hypocritical and go to away games where there may be 50% attendance.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be possible. Honestly, it's not going to be an option.
Okay, good.
And then, Carl, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of your hopes for trying to broadcast things if we actually get to playing games?
Yeah, so we're set up to live stream, and we can do on demand as well if you're not around during the game. We used that last year, and it was really popular. So we'll do that again. I know Jack Pacetto is interested in broadcasting some stuff on SBS. We don't have exclusive rights to him. He does various games around the county, but that's an option as well.
I'm sorry, I had one more quick question too, because Carl, you said that March 5th would be the latest date that they could play. I thought the fall 2 started February 23rd, or did I get that wrong?
No, that's been adjusted a little bit. It's going to be a little bit later start. Everything's kind of been pushed back a little bit. There'll be a slight overlap of fall 2 and spring, but you could play. The expectation is that you can finish fall 2 and then be eligible to play in the spring. And spring will run later than normal. That's going to run right up to July.
Okay.
Quick question. Does anybody know, I know as a school, we didn't have officially soccer, but I know a majority of the players went into like a travel league and played. I'm just thinking contact wise, do we know if any of those players are within that league, if there was any transmission of COVID there? Because I know through baseball, I did the Babe Ruth, the Little League, and we were very successful in not having any. But I'm just wondering with soccer, because it's much more of a contact sport.
I could tell you anecdotally in the Berkshire County League that there was not. And more importantly, Berkshire County is the only place that didn't have MIAA soccer. The rest of the state did. And there was not one incident of transmission through a high school soccer game in Massachusetts during the whole season as tracked by the MIAA. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's similar for, physical contact type thing. I know one is outside and one is inside, but, people are bumping and crashing into each other. And so I was curious.
I'll tell you also for the club leagues, the private club leagues in soccer, there was not, as far as reporting goes, there was never any transmission. There was facilities that were shut down to prevent any spread and games canceled and things like that. And it seemed like everybody was very, very ahead of the game.
Great. No, that's good news. Just thinking ahead, even though basketball is inside, with the kids being so close to each other, knowing that soccer was successful and not.
Rules, Bonnie, just so you know, rules did change, though. There were no headers. There were no throw-ins to remove any touching of the ball.
Yep.
And my understanding, while I don't think it happened in soccer, there was an outbreak on one of the Pittsfield teams that had come through one of the club teams, and things got shut down right away. Games were canceled, and that was all. So there was a lot of communication happening and stuff like that as well.
Perfect.
Anyone else?
Carl,
Yeah.
Carl, for people who want to stream the games, can you give the address that people, once basketball, if it goes with competition, how people can stream that?
Yeah, I'll have it on the website. It's easy to connect to.
Great.
Anyone else?
Yes, this is Diane. I have a question.
Yes.
I just wonder if maybe some of these smaller teams like basketball would be considered a family group in some cases. That maybe, I understand that it's important to be in school, but maybe the fact that these players are not in school keeps them away from the rest of the population. And maybe if somehow through testing and keeping them in a gym, maybe with masks on to practice, or testing them before or at certain intervals with a rapid test even, that might make it safer for them to practice. If anybody wanted, or if Carl wanted to reevaluate at some point, if school never went back to being not remote. So a season is not lost for some of the players in basketball. I know that they...
Yeah, Diane, I think it's an interesting idea. As Christy, Carl, and I have talked about this, we've really tried to prioritize the academic side, and that the kids are students first and athletes second. So I'm a little reluctant to do it, but if you want to talk more offline with us, we're happy to have that conversation some more.
Okay, or even to leave the possibility open if in January things are not opening, that maybe it could be reevaluated in some way, even just for practice, not even for games.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, so let's move on to the next one, and Kate and I will talk to this a little bit. As we're now in this remote posture, or largely in remote posture, and even at the early in the start of the year when we started remotely and then started bringing kids back, we've done some work with students that we alternately describe as cohort A or high needs. And there was just some confusion about that, I think, in the community and the maybe even the school committee. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. The thinking there is that some subset of our students have a much harder time accessing their education if it's remote. So we're trying to build a way to support some subset face-to-face, even when most of the rest of the district is remote. Typically, that would include some students with particular needs identified in their IEPs or individualized education plans, perhaps some English language learners, and perhaps our pre-K students. I just wanted to flag that because as we go forward, we'll be talking more about it and trying to figure out what the right balance is of which group of kids we may continue to support in person, as long as we feel we can do that safely, versus the bulk or large majority of kids who'd be remote. And then ideally at some point we get everybody back, whether it's in a full face-to-face or some sort of hybrid approach. Kate, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't have much to add to that. I guess I would just say, it's largely the same information that I shared with you guys in August at the meeting that we had. The guidance that we're getting from DESE hasn't changed since the summer. DESE wants to see our high need students, as Peter mentioned, students with significant disabilities, our ELs, our pre-K kiddos. They want to see them in school for in-person learning as much as possible. So we've continued to focus on those groups in each of the three buildings with a little bit of expansion to include other students where we see some significant needs. So that's what we've been doing. Largely, as I said, nothing really has changed. We still have very clear guidance from DESE on what they want us to do, and the kids we're targeting are the kids that we identified early on with a handful of others.
Okay, great. And to put it into context, it's like 5 or 6 kids on each grade. Okay, so people have a sense of the total numbers. Okay. So the next one, and I'll have Sharon come on and talk about this a little bit, is the district bus contract. We shared it in the packet, and it's a proposed contract. And then there's a memo outlining it. What Sharon did in working with our attorneys and also Southern Berkshire, because it's a joint contract, they went through a whole bunch of things. And if you read it carefully, there are all these different tiers. So the big one is the first 10 days of the year, when we had those days for professional development, we're reducing the rate or proposing to reduce the rate to 45%, because they weren't, they were standing ready to provide a service, but they weren't providing a service. And then there's a discounted rate on remote days, again, because they're standing ready to do stuff, but not. And the in-person days would be paid at the full rate. The other thing is athletics and other activities are only going to be paid if it's scheduled and run by Massini, right? So a number of sports aren't happening that would have done travel, and there'll be no cost there. So that's what it is. Sharon may want to share a couple other ideas, and then we're happy to respond to questions.
I don't have anything to add, but certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
I know this, it contemplates the shorter school year, but if we end up building out the school year a little bit or playing with the calendar in the spring, will we have the flex? Is this just the rate structure? Then we can change the days, or are we just locked into this number of days under this new contract?
Our contract is for 180 days. So if we if we add anything, we just do it on a per diem basis.
Of the regular full rate. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And they stand ready to do that if need be?
Yes, as long as we obviously give them enough notice so that we can make sure the drivers are available.
Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
So I have a motion by Rich, a second by Molly. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Molly?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And I, so it's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to appreciate them. They've worked really hard with us to be flexible. So I think that's working out. The next thing that's on the agenda is a high school update on extraordinary maintenance. And in a second, I'll have Christy and Steve tag team this. At our last meeting, we talked some about some of the extraordinary maintenance that they wanted to do. And part of it initially was characterized as replacing lockers. And if you read Christie's memo on this, it's much, much more than that. So I thought it'd make sense for Christy and Steve to talk a little bit about the genesis of their thinking and why they collectively and Buildings and Grounds want to invest in this. So Christy, Steve, and maybe even Jason, I hand it over to you to share some context.
Thank you, Peter. I apologize that I was not at the last meeting. I would have probably spoken to this then. But when Steve and Jason asked me to sit down with the Building and Ground Subcommittee, and I met with Steve and we were talking about priorities for the building, for me, one of the very first things that came to mind was the hallways. I know we often hear people talk about how dark the hallways are in the building, and the climate that creates for students. The students themselves had done a survey 2 years ago and found that very, very few students use lockers. And one might be thinking, well, if very few students use lockers, why would we want to replace them? But if the reason they're not using the lockers is because of the configuration of the lockers and where they're located in the building, that, doesn't, I think if you're in the building and see the students walking around with the very, very, very heavy backpacks that they have, they might actually appreciate having a space that is theirs where they can put things. Right before school closure last year, I had met with our YATS team. For those of you who don't know, that stands for Youth and Adults Transforming Schools Together. And they were preparing to actually lead a faculty meeting in March with the faculty where we were going to do what's called a ghost walk through the school. And students were going to lead teachers around the building to have teachers really look and think about what the space feels like for them. So the teachers never had an opportunity to do that because school closed before that faculty meeting happened, but the students did that with me. And it's really fascinating to walk around the building and listen to the students describe the hallway space from their perception, because it's not just the dark space, but it's also like what we could potentially use space for. So when Steve and I sat down and talked about the lockers, newer lockers are configured in a much different way. So they're stacked on top of one another and would take up much less space in the hallways, which would actually make the hallways a little wider and would also allow us to think about using space in the hallways for things like a little area where students can study, which both the elementary school and middle school have in their hallways because of the way that classrooms are grouped. And the high school does not have that. So in my opinion, this is something that actually would really shift the climate of the building, and it would be a very positive impact. It's obviously not something we can do in 1 year, and the proposal you received is a phased-in approach to this. The thinking is we would replace a certain number of lockers, and we would likely do a lottery for those new lockers, and that would actually give us a sense of how many lockers we would need, so that we wouldn't necessarily have to purchase lockers for every student if in fact not all students really want to use lockers. But if they do, then over time we could replace them all and have enough for our students. So that's what I framed in that memo to all of you, and I'm happy to answer some questions. And I know Steve's on, so he can add more as well if you'd like.
You covered it pretty well, Christy. So
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we phasing it? Why not just do it?
I think it'd be a big price ticket to do all of them in 1 year. I've been in communication. I had a guy here a year or two ago and been in communication with him. It's a local company out of Pittsfield. And I emailed back and forth with him today. He said he'd get me the pretty firm numbers by the end of the week. So I should have them tomorrow.
Anyone else?
Well, just Steve, to follow up. So roughly to do all of them would be what, like north of $600,000? Is that?
No, I don't think that much. I kind of did my own research on this, and you can spend very little on lockers, or you can spend, pretty heavily. And obviously, typically I try to go towards the middle when I'm confronted with that, so that we purchase something that's going to last, but not necessarily something, that you would find at a college or a university locker room.
If I could just say something quickly as well. I mean, I just want to say thank you to Christy and Steve for helping the building and grounds really prioritize and giving your opinion on what needs to be done. And again, it's our subcommittee's opinion that, the students at the school now, they deserve as much as we can give them. And obviously, funds are limited, but with what we have, we should try to maximize our dollar and make their experiences as pleasant as possible. So we all feel strongly that, this extraordinary maintenance to the high school is important for the students there, and any renovation project or rebuild, they're not going to see the benefit of it. So anything we can do to maximize our dollars to help the greatest amount of students, we feel is important as a subcommittee.
Yep. And I'd just like to say that the price that was given to the subcommittee was $80,000 to get rid of 900 lockers.
That's not to get rid of 900. Well, it might be to demo the 900 and bring in some, but that's not going to replace 900. We never really intended in replacing 900 anyway.
Okay.
Because we were looking at the census numbers that we got with the failed building attempt, and they did a 10-year projection as to our enrollment. So we would shoot for, I think that number was 550, 560, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I guess I would just throw in there, I certainly agree. I love the idea of brightening up the halls and doing something for the students that are there right now. I would just say that at a price tag like that, making sure that we're using it to get the most bang out of our buck and to ensure that that is truly what the students want. And I don't know how that would look. I don't know if it would slow down the process right now, but if they're given kind of a price of, a budget of $80,000, $100,000 or something like that, and start to actually kind of prioritize, well, which things could they get for that kind of money? I would just personally be curious to see if lockers still stay up there, because my understanding about lockers, whether it be from my own kids or even just looking online at what's going on typically at high schools across the country, is that this is kind of a normal trend, that high school kids are just not using lockers for one reason or another. There are still maybe needs for them to secure some key things at different points in the day, but some schools use cubbies and things like that. So I just, not that I want to slow this process down, but just to throw out there, if it makes sense at all, to kind of think a little bigger, think a little more creatively, and if there's any point at all in going back to the students just to confirm that this is truly what they want.
Yeah, I understand that we're trying to make the high school more presentable for the students, and I'm all for that. But I wonder if there's a better way to spend that kind of money on education, because ultimately that's what we need to do to present the best education we can. Science labs we've done, but isn't there other things we can do? And I still have this looming picture, and maybe I'm the only one, that we're going to start a project fairly soon. And if we're phasing in lockers, the third year of the phase-in, the next year we might be ripping the school down. So I do have some concerns.
And we always have that boiler.
That's absolutely right. Heat's important to education too.
Well, if people want to know what the lockers look like, go up to Mount Greylock, because when the Next Steps Committee went up there, three of us, I like the idea of what is being presented, because I have seen in person and up close the lockers that are being talked about as possible replacements. And the Mount Greylock students were surveyed, and this is one of the things that Mary McDonald, who was the principal at that time, said they were for getting rid of the lockers. And the lockers are compatible enough so you can put iPads, not iPads, they're computers in, things like that. So.
Bill, let's not do any visits to Mount Greylock for a little while, but maybe we could get him to send some photos down to us.
Yeah.
I mean,
we'll have more discussion on this in the budget too. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I from what I'm hearing tonight, I'm trending towards this is not a budget issue. This is a bonding issue, but I guess that's a conversation we can have in the context of the budget.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And in some ways, if we're done with stuff on this, that transitions us well into the preliminary budget review. Are there any other questions or comments from the school committee on this? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and Sharon and I are going to work through a number of slides. This is an important part of our budget. The finance subcommittee has been doing a lot of work, our budget process, right? So the finance subcommittee has been doing a lot of work on the budget, and what we're sharing now is our preliminary budget review. It's talking about process and some placeholders for numbers and things we're doing. It's super, super important for everybody to remember that stuff changes internally within the schools and the district, and stuff changes at the state level. The governor just signed off on this year's budget, and now they're starting to work on next year's budget. But this sort of, it's a beginning point in our process, which will then set up some really detailed conversations in the spring. So give me just a sec to pull it up, and we'll go from there. You can't see it yet, right?
No. Okay, sorry. You know what? I'm sorry about this. For whatever reason, it's not loading. I'm gonna get this up on our website, and I'm gonna verbally talk through the slides. My apologies around this. It typically we do stuff in Google within the district, and because we're doing it in Zoom, it's not letting me share it.
Peter, if you give me permission, I might be able to share it.
Let me see if I can do that. Sharon, I'm a co-host, but it's not letting me make you a co-host. If the CTSB guy's still on, maybe he can do that.
Okay. Do you want me to send you the PDF? Do you think that would help?
No, I have it in PowerPoint and as a PDF, and it's not letting me do either.
I believe CTSB is still on, so if they could make Sharon a co-host, that would be wonderful. If not, we'll just take your advice, Peter.
I don't see Sharon's name in the list here, so I'm just let me look for it.
Sorry, it's S. Harrison.
Okay.
Okay, so Sharon, now you're a co-host, so see if you're able to do it. Great. All right, we're in business. Thank you for that. This is just our title slide.
Of course I can't.
Can you advance to the next one, Sharon? Okay. So whenever we start a budget thing, we always share our mission to ensure all students are challenged through a wide range of experiences to become engaged, curious learners and problem solvers who effectively communicate, respect diversity, and improve themselves and their community. And again, I think we're making real strides towards this. The next one, Sharon. As we start doing this, we're really doing two things. We're starting to work with the school committee on reviewing budget requests from administrators, and we're starting a process where we really have a lot of time to consider and discuss the budget. The next one, Sharon. We'll get our revenue estimates in the third week of January, and the true impacts on the towns will be known after the third week in January. And that's sort of what I was alluding to around information changing. Next slide. So the school committee is always operated by these sort of policies or guidelines to get the greatest educational returns and contributions to the educational program in relation to the dollars expended, to establish levels of funding that'll provide high quality education for all our students, and to use the best available techniques for budget development and management. And I think historically, we've done a very good job of this. A year or two ago, Sharon actually got an award from the Business Administrators Group for how well she helps us through the budget process. The next slide. This sort of is reiterating that. So let's keep going, and we'll talk about things. So there are two, and we'll go through a bunch of priorities. But as we look forward, we're going to need to continue to respond to the potential impact of COVID-19. And in any year, but in particularly a year like this year or the last couple years, we want to focus our funding on closing educational gaps. We'd like to invest in meeting students where they are, and two things that are coming up are the potential to focus where appropriate on smaller groupings as our primary support, and then to also build in time for additional tutoring as needed or if needed. There's a lot of research coming out around this, and that tutoring is particularly the way to support students as we emerge from, or sort of as we're stuck in COVID and then emerge from it. We're looking a lot at content and curriculum across the district, and investing a lot in team meetings in between or across the three buildings. At the elementary school, continue to focus on learning and development with an emphasis on writing and math. Real gleaning or learning moment, aha moment from this year is around right sizing grades and sections, and to always be nimble around pre-K and EK section needs and what we need to do there. At the middle school, again, align curriculum with some of the state's goals and hopefully surpass those goals. Invest particularly in supplies and materials to achieve that alignment, and also have the right size of grades and sections. At the high school, a big focus in recent years with our grant money and other work has been around looking at the CTE, the Career Technical Education, what used to be called vocational programs, and rework our course of studies, student groupings, and schedules to best support student successes. This is all ongoing work. We're writing district improvement plans that are for 3 years at a time. And each year we're building on where we had been before. So as we look at this, our initial budget where we land is a gross operating budget of 3.2%, a net assessment increase of 4.13%, and increases to the towns of 0.58% to 5.38%. So, and we'll go into this in the next couple slides, but we have the total increase, and then that increase is apportioned differently to the towns based on a whole number of factors, and I'll share some more detail on that. How we get to the 3.2% change. It's an increase of $940,481. Later, we'll show you some additional slides that a lot of this is tied up in staffing and benefits, because that's where the bulk of our budget is. The next one. So this speaks to it. So 72%, or a little more than 72%, are tied to contractual obligations. 7 and almost 3/4% are education supplies, materials, and equipment, and 6.14% is tied to retirement. The last few, transportation, 5.38%. Facilities and operations, 3.4%, and insurance and other benefits, 1.98%. I think this is the break, and I can't see her, where, oh, maybe, yeah, no, that one, right? And now I think Sharon's going to talk about the next 10 slides. Sharon?
Well, to continue on with where the increases are, transportation is 5.38% of the increase, facilities and operations, 3.4%. Peter did this, insurance and other benefits. That includes Medicare tax, unemployment, health insurance. I don't expect an increase this year on health insurance because we're running our claims to revenue is running really good at about 89%. Tuition, 1.44%. That's mostly for our out-of-district students. Technology, 1.22%, just to keep up with our refresh. Activities and athletics, very small at 0.33%. The school committee professional services and fees, that's mostly in legal fees. And again, that includes special education legal. Professional development, very, very small increase of 0.2%. Short-term borrowing, that includes our revenue anticipation notes as well as any borrowing that we do for capital. And it has been overfunded, so we decreased that about 0.27%. That's the operating budget. And then we go into the capital budget. Right now, all we have for our borrowing is the last 3 years of the elementary middle school construction bond. So FY22, and then there's 2 more years after that. And then we took a vote, and we're going to take hopefully a revised vote for short-term borrowing in this budget to repair the chillers at the elementary school. That will be paid in the next budget. So we have MSBA funding for the elementary and middle school construction bonds. And then it will be my recommendation that for the $80,000 that we're paying the chiller borrowing, that come from E&D. So the net impact of that on assessments is actually a slight decrease of 0.39. Again, that's just the capital part. So assessments come in, we have three considerations: the population allocation, and that always shifts a little bit between the 3 towns; the minimum local contribution, as the state mandates based on our foundation budget, which is based on the governor's budget, which is what comes out the 3rd week in January, and then the net assessment. So Peter talked a little bit about how our gross budget is 3.2%, but the net assessment is a little bit more because our funding source is down a little bit. That's what gets allocated after we take out what the towns have to pay for minimum local. And for the population allocation, you'll see that Great Barrington went up slightly, Stockbridge almost the same amount, and then West Stockbridge came down significantly. And that's why you see the 0.58 increase. That's for West Stockbridge. We actually call this our draft proposed working budget because there are some things we still don't know, like the actual transportation increase, because that's with CPI, as well as any insurances, and then the minimum local. So the variables I talked a little bit about. House 1, which comes out, I'm sorry, that should be January 2021. It's due the third week in January 2021. House 1 is the governor's budget, and then we go into all the House and the Senate and the joint meetings. The minimum local contribution, that comes out after House 1 comes out. I'm sorry, this didn't change either. The health and dental insurance rates, that's the Berkshire Health Group, which we're a member. We're meeting the last Monday in January. Then our early education census, that comes in later in the year. And then any unanticipated program changes. Again, I can't tell you what they are because they're unanticipated. We don't know what they are right now, but things can change sometimes in January. And that's, we don't give the fine detail on the assessment because all of those variables in play could shift that in January. So our purpose in this presentation is to give the school committee sort of some background information so that you can start thinking about the direction we'll be heading as of this point, and then that could change in January, but we'll be talking with the finance subcommittee, and Rich typically updates the school committee after those finance subcommittee meetings. So, questions?
Okay, and maybe Jen, let's put away the question slide so we could see people a little bit better.
Anyone, questions, school committee, audience?
I'll just point out that, I know Peter hit a lot of the high point things in the original budget, but there's really not any, in the numbers that Sharon presented, any real significant line item shifts between everything. It's really kind of a level program budget. Is it fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah. Not that we can't still make those, obviously. I mean, that's kind of what we're starting the process of looking at.
Right. And we're trying to be really deliberate going into an uncertain year. We don't really have a great sense of what's going to happen at the state level. And we use our resources really carefully and intentionally.
So this is just the beginning of the process. Sometimes we pay the penalty for being so early that people think this is what's going to happen at a town meeting. This is really early. We can't stress that enough, but it's worked out very well for us doing it this way with the finance subcommittee, working with the administration, and I think we'll continue to do it this way.
I think the good thing is sometimes even at this stage, there's already like big surprises, and as Peter said, who knows what's going to come, but I'm pleasantly surprised where we're at. I mean, we've had years at this point where we're looking at a massive, health insurance spike or something that we're just spend 3 months digging ourselves out of. So I feel pretty comfortable at this point. I think that third Wednesday in January when the governor's budget come out will be another big hurdle to get over.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we will move ahead. Peter, do you have anything else?
No, I think in terms of the superintendent's report, I'm done. There's some policy things, and then Sharon's got a couple business things to update and do. So,
did Sharon want a motion now, or are you waiting for the next line item?
I think let's get through the subcommittee reports, and that stuff's under business operations, so we could do it then.
So we'll go quickly through subcommittees. Policy has not met. Buildings and grounds, Jason?
Have not met.
Superintendent's evaluation, Ann?
Has not met.
And I spoke to Doreen, and she's going to try to schedule something early in the new year.
Thank you.
Great.
Technology has not met. Rich, finance?
You just heard it, everything we talked about. So
yes. And district consolidation and sharing has not met as a subcommittee.
Great.
Any questions on the personnel report? Sharon, it's yours. Business operations.
I'm coming back.
Thank you.
My internet is a little unstable today. So the warrant reports, we put these two in because we haven't had a quorum of our warrant subcommittee. So the first round of warrants, we had one member signed, Bill Fields, and I think we had two sign the last warrant subcommittee meeting. And if that happens, if there's no quorum of the warrant subcommittee, then the school committee needs to be made aware. And I would say that it would be best if we have a vote on it. That way it's formal. That way if our auditors ask about it. It's pretty standard. There are, our payroll, AP, and then our health insurance warrants.
Sharon, let me just ask you a question. It's likely that for the next few months, we're not going to have an in-attendance subcommittee quorum. I know for the town, we've designated one person to sign the warrants. Should we look at that for the school district so you don't have to go through this?
Even if there's only one that signs, by law, we're supposed to bring that back to the school committee.
Okay.
It's not, for me, it's not an issue because I put it all together so that I know what warrants are being signed and I can track them.
Okay.
Motion to approve the warrant?
Both.
Both warrants as presented.
So I have a second. So I have a motion by Rich and a second by Molly to approve both warrants. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Molly?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
Rich?
Yes.
And I, so it's unanimous.
Okay, the next thing is just the report on the final expenses and account balances, and you'll see that typically there are not many balances left on the line item accounts because I move it into contingency. System method that I've developed that makes it easier for me to track. This will give you an idea of what was spent last year. Obviously not a typical year with school being out for 3 months. We didn't have a number of our regular expenditures, the transportation, subs, all of that purchasing at the end of the year didn't happen. You'll also see this again when you look at the line item budget for FY22. We have what you'll see in that will compare actuals from 20 to budget of 20, and then budget of 21, and then proposed of 22. So you'll see this again. So if you do have time to take a look at the line items, it might help, particularly new members, give you a good background when we start looking at the budget, proposed budget for 22.
I would actually recommend that for new members to virtually sit down with Sharon to go over these, because I think it'll give you a head start on the budget.
And what I do every year when Sharon and I look at this is I just go through with a highlighter and I flag things that look odd, right? And then I ask Sharon about it, and there's always a good reason, but it makes sense to do.
Questions? Okay. The final thing I have here is just a request to for a revised vote on the borrowing. During the FY21 budget process, We did have a vote for borrowing for $80,000 for the chiller and $60,000 for filters. The filters came in much lower than that, and we were able to absorb that in the operating budget. So really, we just need to do the borrowing for the chillers. I'm requesting a revised vote that only has the chillers in it. We need to notify the towns that it has been revised. And it's just, we need to certify to the banks when we do our borrowing how much we have approved to borrow. And it will just be better if we have the one vote for the 80,000, which is all we intend to borrow this year.
Do I have a motion? You're muted, Rich.
So
There we go. Move. Was that a motion to mute Rich permanently, Phil? Is that what that was? I move that the district updates a borrowing vote and appropriates the amount of $80,000 for chiller repairs, including the payment of all costs incidentally related thereto. Said sums to be expended under the direction of the school committee. To meet this appropriation, the district treasurer, with the approval of the chair of the school committee, is authorized to borrow said amount under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 6D, subsection D, and the district agreement as amended or pursuant to any other enabling authority. Any premium received under the sale of any bonds or notes may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to pay such costs by a like amount.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Rich, a second by Bill. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Molly?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
And aye, it's a unanimous vote. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Do we have any old or new business before the committee? Do we have any public comment?
So actually, I'd like to say something. This is Amanda Hanlon-Hockler, 193 Maple Avenue.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I had a conversation with Peter and with Ben Doran and several of the classroom teachers regarding Wednesdays. And I have to let the school committee know that I have a lot of concern about Wednesday and the amount of asynchronous learning that happens on those days. When I reached out to Peter and Ben, they told me that the primary purpose of Wednesday was for professional development and to allow cleaning between cohorts. And Jesse says that there should be 170 days of school this year. They granted 10 days of professional development in the beginning of the year. And if we took the 10 half days that we would normally have in a school year, and we combine them and make them into full days, that would only be 5. And we've currently had 12 Wednesdays in the school year, plus the 10 days that we had at the beginning of the year, are 22 school days that we've had for professional development. Now, I have 3 kids in school. I'll tell you that my experience in those grade levels is that a teacher checks in with them for a morning meeting type situation from anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes, and that there might be a total of 1 hour of work that is assigned for the entire day. And I'll tell you in the 5th grade that on Thursdays and Fridays in a hybrid model, my son also only had about an hour of work. Now, I reached out to the teachers because I thought Evan must be missing something. He must be telling me he's done. And I reached out to the teachers and they said, no, he absolutely is on track. And so when I log into Canvas and I look and see a spelling lesson for 30 minutes worth of work and a math video, I have to tell you that 3 hours a week to replace 18 hours a week of instruction is terrible. And with 100, if I ask Desi to look at this, and I believe that I'm going to, and many other parents are going to, I don't think that your Wednesday morning check-in and the asynchronous learning comes anywhere near meeting 170 days of school. Now in the spring, Desi's guidelines to us were student re-engagement. I'm also an educator in Lennox. The guidelines were for student re-engagement. So I'll tell you that Wednesday looks very much like what a spring emergency COVID teaching looked like. It looks like student re-engagement. If you're able to get your kid to read for 30 minutes, if you're able to have them do all that extraneous things, which I can because I hired a nanny. I gave up my salary to be with my children, to be with my kids, to help them with their education. But I know a lot of other parents can't say, did you do that extra 30 minutes of reading? If I called the school on any other day and said, hey, Peter, hey, Ben, hey, Tim, I'm not bringing Evan to school today. I'm not bringing Audrey to school today. But don't worry, we'll read for 20 minutes and watch a math video. It would be absolutely unacceptable. I will tell you that largely among the community, we call it Wasted Wednesday. And I think if Desi takes a close look at this, that it doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the 170-day requirement. And in a pandemic, I understand that we're in a pandemic, but I also realize that there are two kind of philosophies around all of this. One philosophy, it's a pandemic. Our expectations should be low. And the other one is that there's a pandemic. So what? Now what? How are we going to get kids to meet the standards? And I'll tell you that at the end of the year, they haven't canceled MCAS. We're still expected to take it. And that makes me sad. But I feel like in the district where I work, we're making strides to make sure that our kids are going to be ready for that. And I have to tell you that in this district, I feel like we're failing kids.
Thank you. Paul Gibbons?
Well, following up on that comment, I'm going to be a little bit mild. I agree with everything that was just said. I didn't hear the term wasted Wednesdays before, but I would add in there wasted Mondays and Tuesdays under the hybrid model that the middle school used earlier before Thanksgiving. And I would hope that if we are to return to a hybrid model, that there's going to be a big change in what goes on Monday and Tuesday, because my grandson is not getting the education that people are paying for.
Yeah,
That's it.
Steve, could I respond to some of this?
Yes.
Yeah, and I might not typically do this. I understand their concerns, and this is very much a work in progress, and I think it's important to unpack all sorts of pieces about this, right? So until quite recently, the elementary school pre-K to grade 4 was in 4 days a week, everybody in school, and we really shifted the schedule so that could happen. Our days are slightly longer than many other school districts, and I feel totally confident that even with the Wednesdays at the elementary school, when we're in face-to-face learning, we're doing wonderfully, and kids are being afforded a full range of opportunities and experiences. And it's not just about days, it's also about minutes and hours. I acknowledge that in some cases the Wednesdays have been less challenging than they can be, and that's feedback that we're taking and trying to incorporate. Our hope was that we would get the middle school in 4 days a week in grades 5 and 6, and we were just ready to do that, and then we got the second or third surge, depending on one's perspective. If and when we're able to do that, I'll have total confidence in what's happening there. The 7th and 8th grade at the middle school is a little more challenging. Those classes and grades are bigger, so there are real constraints around being able to get everybody in. I think as evidenced in the last few weeks with the the remote learning at the middle school, kids, including my own son, who's an 8th grader, are very engaged and have a very full day of synchronous learning, which, unlike some neighboring districts where they're only doing half a day face to face, I think our kids are actually getting more time. The high school's been able all along to have a model where kids are in school, and then kids who are young people who are at home are participating in the same context, and I think that works. As we get to the spring, we may have to revisit the Wednesdays some. There's a big debate going on at the state level, and a whole thing around student learning time, and the state had all the districts fill out very complex surveys and then flag districts who were not meeting those expectations. From a minute and hour perspective, we're meeting the expectation, and the state gave us approval or conditional approval. But that being said, there's work for us to do, and I think we have to continue to rethink what's happening on Wednesdays. And I'm in conversation with the principals, and the principals are in conversations with teachers around that. I think that the thing that's potentially harder about Wednesdays are the implications for childcare and working parents who can't be home with their kids.
Why does Wednesday not look just like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday in the fully remote model?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, we don't need any comments. Rich asked a question.
It potentially could, or it could over time. When we were in the fully hybrid model, it made sense for there to be a break between kids in the building. When we thought that sort of the wiping down everything was an important lever in that, that's part of why we built that in. That may now be less important than we thought, but it's still probably a very good practice.
Peter, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I speak to that from the high school perspective?
Yeah, please.
Well, yeah, and we're not going to get into a long discussion on this because it's not on the agenda, and this was not. This is citizen speak time, public comment, and we usually don't get into long discussions about this, but go ahead, Christy.
I agree with you, Steve. I retract my question, but I want that issue put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, that's what I would plan on doing. That's exactly right.
Okay. I won't respond right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to think that we get feedback and we continually evolve, right? So we're open to that, and we're open to making shifts.
Paul, do you have a process question? Otherwise, you've spoken also.
I just wanted to mention, I forgot to give my name. Paul Gibbons, Great Barrington.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, anyone else? Then by unanimous consent, we are adjourned for this evening.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.